Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
In today's episode, I talk with Lou Greenwald, Majority Leader in the New Jersey General Assembly. Leader Greenwald and I talked about his next New Jersey manufacturing program, which was signed into law just last month and will direct historic investment in the state's manufacturing economy, creating good-paying jobs and long-term economic growth. We also talk about the New Jersey governor's race and whether Democrats can break the cycle of alternating parties holding that position, about the tragic but really heartwarming circumstances that brought him into elected office, and his deep passion for this work, grounded in curiosity and an ability to make a difference. Stay to the end to hear his message for anyone thinking about running for office or getting involved in politics. It really will help restore your faith in government. I hope you enjoy. Majority Leader Lou Greenwald, thanks so much for joining us on Honorable Profession.
Thank you so much.
It's really great to talk to you.
Thank
We're
you.
really happy to have you. Lots to talk about. I thought that maybe we would start with a big legislative win that you had recently, which is really exciting. And I'm excited to hear about how it's going to impact New Jersey, but also I think it's got real important implications for the rest of the country too, which was a real big manufacturing investment bill that you passed. The governor signed into law last month. Maybe tell us about what that is. It's the next New Jersey manufacturing program. What is it and why was it important right now?
So I've been doing this for a long time. I've been 30 years in the state legislature, and New Jersey is not alone in this. We've seen a decline in manufacturing jobs and opportunities, and the investment in creating jobs for people that are skilled labor, that have a unique skill set to earn a wonderful living for them and their family with benefits, is something that we're always trying to invest in. We've had a strong track record in New Jersey working with labor unions and project labor agreements and infrastructure development. But the manufacturing side, and it's, again, New Jersey's not alone. This has been a phenomenon throughout the country, has dwindled and has lost traction. So we've seen opportunities where we can invest in that tied to some of our other great industries around research and development and some of our research in the science fields that lead to products that have the opportunity to be designed. So the intention was honored to work with Governor Murphy on it. The intention was to really try to find an area that we could have growth off of existing industries and create opportunities for citizens across the board. I'm very happy to hear you say that it is a model that may get traction nationally, because I look at us so much as a global economy. It's why I'm frustrated by a lot of what we see coming out of Washington with the tariffs and the impact on all of that. I'm curious, when the president started with his tariff conversation around creating manufacturing back in this country, as soon as he cut his quote unquote deals with the other nations around what the percentages would be, you didn't hear anything more about jobs and the creation. But I think that's critically important. I think our opportunity to invest in science, research, and development, share those with the rest of the world, build those opportunities here at home are critically important. I'll just finish with one area that we're intrigued by that we worked with as alternative energy to help bring energy costs down, was the investment in wind and the manufacturing that we could do with that in alternative energy here in New Jersey, not just off our coast, but to have the ability to build and manufacture a lot of those products here in New Jersey and maximize, our great ports out of the state of New Jersey. A lot of controversy, Deb, on those issues, as I'm sure you've read about. Clearly a concern around changing the quote unquote landscape of our Jersey Shore, a remarkable asset and economic driver. Too much propaganda around it, with people suggesting, very inappropriately and scare tactics that it was killing whales and dolphins. Not a single windmill has been built. But the reality is, I think what we learned is the industry needed to handle it better. And so, again, the investment has led to greater advancements in technology where these windmills could be and produce energy to provide energy for over 2 million residents in the state of New Jersey, 80 miles off our coast, which is really what the concern, I think, for all of us was, would you see these as you were sitting on your vacation on the Jersey shore from the beaches? And the reality is no one's going to see it 80 miles offshore. So I think had we started there would have been a much different conversation around that. We need to continue that conversation, and all of these pieces, including the manufacturing side, fit directly into that. The last thing I would say to it is it's very important that that bill was done with bipartisan support.
Yeah.
So I was very proud to have my friend, a Republican senator, join us in that legislation, Mike Testa, from the southern part of the state.
Yeah, no, this is something that should be a bipartisan, priority. We want to make sure that you've got those kind of jobs coming back into your state. Is that unusual for New Jersey? I mean, I still think that people look at Washington and see how broken it is. But I do know that in many states, there's still opportunities to find that bipartisan cooperation and get things done. It sounds like this is one example, but was that unusual for New Jersey, or is that something you've been able to do?
Debbie, I think the bipartisanship kind of breaks down over the budget, where I think people go into their partisan corners, although we do get bipartisan support for the budget. I'm proud to say that as well. But that tends to fall more into its partisan traps of spending too much money versus our philosophy that the state and its economy is growing organically and we're investing back in the state. The bipartisan spin or the partisan spin rather, of the Republicans saying we should spend less, but they don't want to identify anything that they would cut. Our response that the budget has grown, but the last Republican administration never funded the pension, never funded a responsible surplus, didn't fund property tax relief programs in New Jersey, which is that is our conundrum, that is our cost driver here. And, of course, didn't want to fund, so many of the programs that were so valuable to us. But our growth in our budget has been around funding the responsible pension, funding responsible surplus after we learned after the pandemic the importance of having that and having something to fall back on, funding public education and fully funding that program. We have the #1 education system in the country, and making sure that we funded these programs appropriately. Unfortunately, those shouldn't be partisan issues. Those should be things we should all get around. But for the most part, they fall on party lines. We're one of only 2 states to have a governor's race this year.
Yes.
And that manufacturing bill and being done in a bipartisan fashion is very important because, no matter who wins that race, we want to hope that that is something that either governor of either party wants to continue to participate in and grow our economy around.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the governor's race. It is on a lot of people's minds right now because it is one of the only 2 governor's races in the country. You've got a really fantastic candidate, of course, and Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are people talking about? I saw a poll today that said that it was tied. I don't know if that's your feeling in the state. I don't know who did that poll, but what are constituents? What are you hearing around the state that people are looking for in the next governor?
So I think it is a close race. There were early polls that had this race 20 points, 13 points. That's not what this race is. A lot of this is driven beyond the candidates. We have, a lot of people look to the historical trends. The one historical trend that favors the Democratic candidate is that, the governor's race goes opposite that of the party in power in Washington. I'm more intrigued by the trend that we as Democrats are going to have to battle, which is that New Jersey really hasn't, in decades, had a party get elected or a candidate from the same party get elected more than 2 terms in a row. So, when I think back and, as a young person, one-term Byrne, who got elected to his second term, who was followed by Governor Kane, a Republican, who was followed by Governor Florio, a Democrat, who was followed, by Governor Whitman, a Republican, who was followed by Governor McGreevey and Governor Corzine, Democrats, who was then followed by Governor Christie. You kind of see the trend, right?
Yeah.
And that's the uphill battle that we're going to have to overcome. I don't think it's a 50-50 split, but I do think it's a 4 to 5 point race, which means everyone is going to have to work hard at turnout. We here in New Jersey in the Democratic Party, we are very skilled at getting out our vote. We have worked very hard to build a responsible, ethical, vote by mail program that is really, I think, one of the finest in the country. And the reality is we need to do that in order to guarantee that people who are entitled to vote have the right to vote and can have their vote heard. So we've done that very effectively. I think that could be a differentiator in this race. That is the trend that we have to buck, that constant turnover from one party to the next in the gubernatorial race. And that has happened in spite of the last 25 years, the legislature being under Democratic control. And I think some voters look at that as the balance. Let's try the other party. We have a check and balance here on the legislative side. But I just think people have to be reminded of what happened. The Republican candidate, Jack Ciattarelli, served with me in the state legislature. I like Jack, worked on programs with Jack. But Jack was here with Governor Christie, and Jack did not stand up when Governor Christie, preached about pension reform, but then never funded it. Jack didn't stand up to Governor Christie when they raided surplus accounts of our school districts, hundreds of thousands of dollars out of each school district that hit property taxpayers. He didn't stand up to the governor or stand with us to override the governor when they canceled property tax rebate programs that made New Jersey affordable for people. He also didn't stand up to the governor when he vetoed legislation that was impactful on gun violence prevention. I was very proud to work on magazine capacity legislation, red flag laws, and others, really working with the families from the tragedy out of Sandy Hook and how important that was. And the reality is Governor Christie vetoed much of that legislation, and elections matter. Governor Murphy signed them in his first days in office. So people need to understand what they're signing up for. And we've obviously had a change in decisions at the Supreme Court that affect gun violence prevention and people's ability to carry weapons. We're seeing the impact day to day from tragedies across the political spectrum, and it's scary. So these elections do matter, and how people act and how they move forward with these issues are critically important.
Absolutely. I mean, back to kind of tying the two thoughts together on your manufacturing work. I mean, across the country, I think that we see Democrats have had a problem or have been losing, people who are in the middle class and struggling to get into the middle class. And this, and having an economic message that resonates with people that have, kind of started to leave the Democratic Party, that can build a broad coalition around an economic policy and agenda that makes sense to people. It feels to me like the manufacturing piece is a big part of that. So that's kind of one of the reasons I brought up as a national model. It's obviously great policy, but also pretty good politics, I think. And I wonder if it's also hard to get your message through right now. Are people aware of this? Is this something that you're hoping that I know you said you'll hope either governor would continue it from a policy perspective, but will this also have political ramifications, or could it?
We hope so. I mean, I think you said it very well. Good public policy is good politics. And, we try to do both. One goes hand in hand with the other. I think you try to talk common sense to folks as you're going through these programs. So whether it was gun violence prevention bills or manufacturing, this is common sense, and it's creating opportunities. I thank you for asking me to do this podcast. This is part of how we're getting the message out. Like, this is new to us. This is the only office I've ever held. I've been in office for 30 years, and it's much different than when I started. Back in the day, we would have done a press conference around the legislation. We would have done a press conference on site. We would have done a press conference at the State House. We would have had 15, 20 outlets there covering it. No one shows up at these anymore. Many of them don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So we're taking our message more to social media, trying to connect with people where they live and how they're getting their information, so that they know that it's out there and that these are being created. But creating an industry doesn't happen overnight. So building the policy and then the commitment and the consistency to stay with it is what is important. Many people want to look at government and say, why doesn't it run like a business? Most stable businesses have consistency of leadership year over year after year. Government isn't designed to be that way. We have change every 4 to 8 years, and sometimes in the legislature every 2 years. So it is, you try to find policies that are on their face common sense, that regardless of party, people will get behind. And our responsibility is to advocate for those and speak truth to power and speak common sense that people understand. And so that's the purpose, and that's the hope of this.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. We could have a whole conversation about government as a business, which makes me crazy. There's lots of reasons that sentence is silly. There's also government has to do some things that private sector can't do. Actually, so, but that's a different conversation.
And Deb, I don't want to, because
No,
I don't want listeners to hear. I'm a small business owner. I've been very successful in my private life. We bring business practices to government,
that's
but
right.
there are restraints on government. There's a constitution. Businesses don't have a constitution that they have to follow.
That's right.
There are contracts that we inherit, that we walk into. There are
That's right.
obligations that we have to, but that consistency matters. And one of the dichotomies in this race is going to be the Republican candidate has not said on it that he would can maintain the consistency that we've had over the last 8 years of fully funding our state pension that we took from the verge of bankruptcy to solvency.
That's
He
right.
has not said that he will maintain these programs that provide real relief for the number one tax problem in the state, which is property taxes.
Yeah.
And instead he's talking about increasing the sales tax, which is a regressive tax, in order to benefit, to cut taxes for high income earners and corporate business taxes, which again, that's the same mantra that we're hearing out of Washington, which I think is what makes us nervous. In spite of the fact that in New Jersey, we have the largest number of small employers than we've ever had in the history of the state, and we're growing and growing responsibly. So these are the challenges that you face, but getting that message out, this is the new way in which to do it, and I thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the other business practices that I think the Democrats need to lean in a little more on. I mean, I know that we probably both agree on a lot. Is a relentless focus on outcomes, right? It's not about what you pass. It's not about how much money you spend. It's about delivering for people. And so that's another reason I love what you were doing with manufacturing credit, and is to actually deliver jobs for the state, to actually deliver new industries to the state. It's like we've got to, and I think that's got to be part of our message as Democrats. You are the majority leader in your body, and so presumably you are out there both hearing from your members what they're hearing. I'm curious, kind of in this really unique time. You said you've been in public service 30 years. I've been doing this type of work for 30 years. We know that everything has changed, not just your communication strategies, but just the whole political landscape. How are your leaders? How are your members out there feeling when they're out, trying to both govern and campaign? What are they hearing from their constituents about what they want from their leaders right now?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's a great question, Dave. I just taught a class yesterday morning and this morning where I went to two different state universities and talked to young people, and we kind of had this conversation. The topics might change, but the theme is always it's affordability. And I think it was an issue that affected the presidential race last year, where the Republican Party was very effective at saying, I'm going to get elected on day one. I'm going to lower the price of goods on the shelves. I'm going to lower the price at the supermarket. I'm going to make this call and end this war in a day. It's just not realistic. And hopefully, I think people see that and say, this is about building policies that make those changes and investing in the state and investing in programs that have longevity. So, the issues that we're hearing right now in New Jersey, and the president's policies out of Washington have had an impact on New Jersey. So his eliminating wind off of our coast and stopping solar and investment in alternative energy around solar has turned off energy supply for millions of New Jersey residents. And it is turning New Jersey from a sending state of energy, to now an importer of energy. Now, there are other issues that have happened. We had a nuclear power plant go offline, but we're looking at investing in new modular nuclear energy. I come from a camp of I'm a believer in all of the above. I think we want diversity when it comes to our energy sources.
Yeah.
And we're looking at that. We're looking at new hydrogen plants. There's a wonderful company in New Jersey that is a gas company that is looking at converting its infrastructure to now provide in the next decade hydrogen energy, which is clean and safe and cheaper. So to me, there is the base of all of this, of which wind and solar should be a piece of, not the replacement, not the sole end all and be all, but a piece of, to help provide for that. But that change from Washington, that impact here in New Jersey, is driving up utility rates. And we're hearing that from people, because we take for granted when I walk into this room and I turn on this switch that the lights come on. I really just want the lights to come on. I don't want to know the mechanics behind it. And I just want to get my energy at a reliable price. When I turn my faucet on, I want to get a glass of water. I don't need to know all the mechanics, but I want to know that it's clean. I want to know that the infrastructure is safe. But there's somewhere lost in the disconnect of there is a cost to doing that. And by the way, it also creates jobs. So how do we do that in an effective way and communicate to people so that they understand? And we have to do a better job at that. And look, I think the next governor, if I were the next governor, I would be calling in the CEOs of all the utility companies on my first day of my transition and saying, look, we got to stabilize these rates. We got to freeze these rates. And we want to figure out how do we get these rates down to an affordable price for your consumers and our constituents. And part of that is how do we help you as companies invest? How do we do a public-private partnership to help you build energy supply here in New Jersey? These are the things that we have to be talking about, but you have to go directly to these people and you have to lead on these issues. And that's how we've solved so many problems here in New Jersey. And I think it's why we've maintained the legislature for the vast majority of the last 3 decades.
Yeah, which is actually remarkable because we're talking about the flipping back and forth with the governor, but the legislature has stayed consistent. How did you get into politics originally? What interested you in all this?
So, I was not someone who grew up saying, I was driven to this or I was called to this. I had the remarkable blessing to watch my mom back in 1977. I was 9 years old. My mom answered an ad in the newspaper to run for office. And she was, to this day, what we look for in recruiting candidates. She was active in the community. She was, a PTA mom. She was a Boy Scout Den Club leader. Before there were soccer moms, she was a Pop Warner football mom. She was active on in her church. She was a member of the Junior Women's League. And all these groups came together when the ad was in the paper and said, Maria, you should respond to this ad. And she did, and she ran, and she became the first woman breaking a glass ceiling, first woman ever elected, the mayor of our hometown, the 12th largest town in the state, Cherry Hill. And I was 9 years old, and I grew up in it, and I watched her serve, and I was so proud. And I was enamored by it. And I saw the difference that you could make in people's lives. And when I was a young lawyer right out of law school, the party had come to me and asked for me to run for the United States Congress back in 1994 against the sitting congressman. And I said no. I was very proud of my mom. I was honored, but I wasn't looking to do it. And I was just starting my practice. My wife and I were engaged. We were looking to get married. And then tragically, a year later, in a car accident, my mom passed away. And the party came back to me. The accident was in January. The party came back to me in March and said, we'd really like you to consider running. We know you said no last year, but the community is mourning, and we'd like to keep her memory alive, and we think you'd be great. So I was mourning, and I missed my mom, and I felt a connection by doing it. And so a year later, after saying no, I decided to run. And I became the first member of my party in over a quarter of a century to get elected to this seat. And I've now served for over a quarter of a century. And, I've just been very honored and proud to have served and do so many things. I tell people it's the last great gift my mom gave me. And I know this podcast is national. And one thing I think that's great about New Jersey's government, which is different than Washington, is that we are a citizens legislature in New Jersey. So not only are we permitted, we're encouraged to maintain our private lives. And through our private life and our experience, we bring those life experience to public policy. So it's ever changing. It's always new. I think it keeps us grounded and very close to our residents and the people we serve. And it's just been a tremendous honor. And I look at my friends in Washington and colleagues who I've served with who have gone to Washington have to give up their careers. And I think it doesn't take long for you to get removed, from what those problems are on the street in your community amongst your neighbors. So I really love this model of government. It's been wonderful. And it's, as I said, it's been a blessing.
Yeah, first of all, I'm so sorry about your mom. She must have. I'm sorry she didn't get to see you serve. I can't imagine how proud she would have been of you. That is, and I wonder, serving for so long in your community and being so connected to so beautifully talking about your mom's connections in all those different ways. I worry about where we are with public service right now. I worry that people are going to choose not to go into public service because of all of the vitriol and the name calling, and even, now we're talking about public safety for elected officials, all of these things. You've been doing it for so long and you do stay connected. Like, what do you tell people who, how do you, and you have to go out and recruit candidates too. What do you tell people about why it's so important to do this kind of work?
Well, when I'm recruiting candidates, I tell them this is the most meaningful thing I've ever done. That I've been able to, in a very quiet way. You don't do this for fanfare and attention. I'm not. We're starting to dip our toe into social media because, again, this is how you're communicating with people, and we don't have that local press that when I started my career. But I've worked on stem cell research labs that have been used to do bone marrow transplants and save children's lives. I've worked on building cancer research centers and medical schools here in New Jersey. We've worked on some of the most impactful. I've worked with the families from Sandy Hook, those parents, on which I could not be more proud of, making meaningful gun violence prevention legislation like red flag laws that actually is one bill that Washington has been able to do in a bipartisan fashion. So there are things, and I could go on and on, that you make a difference on. And I think what I've loved about this job is, as a lawyer, and a lawyer now who specializes in healthcare, that's an area in a field that I'm very passionate about and I enjoy, and I learn things and I can bring that to public policy. But there are other areas that in my practice I would have never touched on, but that as someone, to do this job well, I think you have to be curious. So if you're curious about something and something grabs your attention, something that you'd want to read, and then you want to learn more about, I have the ability to do that. And if you run for this office, you have the ability to do that and then build public policy around it. And so I think that's what I tell my members. There's anything that you're passionate about, anything that you wish you would have done in your life, you have an avenue to do it here through public policy. The last 2 days, as I shared with you, I've spoken to 2 of our universities and their political science classes. And what I've told them, if just one of you walks away from this lecture and decides that you want to participate, then that's a win. In any way, and run, work in government, any role whatsoever, then that's a win. And I had a young woman yesterday ask me, how do I, as an elected official, help restore trust to them?
Yeah.
And in public service and in government. And while that breaks my heart a little bit, it's why I go to those classes. And what I said to her, which is what I would say to any of your listeners, is, at 9:30 on a Wednesday morning or at a 10:30 on a Thursday morning today, there's a lot of other things I could be doing with my day. But I'm choosing to go and volunteer and speak before a class, 90% of whom are not in my district, to talk to them about the difference you can make in government. And from whatever career you choose in New Jersey, as a citizen legislature, you can choose to get involved and make a difference. And to me, if I'm doing that, not asking for anything, but wanting you to find something in yourself that would drive you to want to be a part of this, hopefully that gives you a level of trust as to why we're doing this. And if you choose not to get involved, you're leaving this to the very people that you're afraid will be, because there will be someone who will fill that void. But I just believe there is a craving out there from the electorate for real people that just have a heart and want to govern with a compassion and have a curiosity to want to solve problems. And if you come with that mindset, anybody can do this.
Yeah. I love all of that. I think curiosity is such an underrated skill or value or whatever it is, which is, it's exactly right. Like, if you are, because it starts from a place of, I might not know everything. I can learn something. It's a little bit vulnerable. It's a little bit authentic. And if it's genuine, a curiosity, you can do something about it, like you said, in that role. So that's just amazing.
And I think, what else I told the students was, in 30 years, I've never drafted a piece of legislation that got signed into law in the exact form that we drafted it. And the reason for that is because to do this job well, you should listen more than you speak. And if you're meeting with people from all sides and you truly go in with an open heart to listen and an open mind, they're going to raise things that are going to make you curious to say that, that improves this. Let's include that. And I think it does a couple things. One, it makes everybody who participates in it from all sides of the debate feel like they were a part of either making the bill better, improving it in some way, or putting their fingerprints on it. And the other thing I think it does, even if somebody doesn't get everything they want, I've had the privilege and the experience of people who've come in to advocate on an opposite side of a position that I have taken, who have come back to me in the future and said, Lou, I didn't agree with everything that you did in that bill, but I appreciated your approach.
Mm-hmm.
And we need a champion. Would you champion this cause for us?
Mm-hmm.
That's the greatest compliment you can get, because every complex solution, every problem if it was easy, it would have been fixed already.
Right.
Every complex solution has people on both sides, but if they feel heard, if they feel part of the process, they want to come back and participate again. And we kind of set the ground rules on how we're going to approach this. And if you've earned their respect that they come back, then that makes this process better. And I think that builds trust in the process, back to your original question, because everybody feels like, their voice is being heard and they're having an imprint on what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that there are more people who govern. You've been so wonderful today and so, passionate and also just so inspiring about public service. And I so appreciate your thoughts. And I think there are more people who govern like you do than people think. And that's what frustrates me, is that I think that, there's a very small number of people who are loud, who are it's my way or the highway, people. And a lot of them are in Washington right now, unfortunately. But, I think the people I work with around the country at state legislatures and mayor's offices, are doing exactly what you're talking about. They're bringing people together, not pulling them apart. And I just think we need to shine a light on that to get to be able to restore some of that faith, because I think most people don't see that every day.
Yeah. And, Debbie, I think it's so sad. And the unfortunate part is the ones that are loud, like that's eye-catching, right? That's interesting. Yeah. That's the shiny object that draws people's attention. Rolling up your sleeves and doing deep dive public policy, it's not sexy, right? Yeah. But that's where the work gets done. And, as I said to the students in the last couple of days, I'm so proud, having worked building cancer centers and working with a world-renowned genetic research lab in New Jersey like Coriell Institute, investing in saving programs like hospice programs and facing Medicaid cuts and different. But they don't know. They shouldn't know any of that. They're not going to school today saying, "Oh my God, the guy that helped bring the cancer center and ultimately MD Anderson to New Jersey is coming in to speak to us today." Mm. You know what they're worried about? They're going to graduate from college and they're struggling to find housing. It's hard to afford a house. Yes. We're trying to address those problems. They're looking for first-time home buyers programs, because that's the immediate crisis. How are they going to pay their student loans? That's what they should be worrying about. Can they get a job in this market? We're seeing the job market change, over the last 12 months, obviously. Those are the real problems that people face every day. They kind of expect us to do the important things. It's the things that are affecting them day in and day out. They need to know that they're being heard. They need to know that they're feeling their pain. I share with them, I came out of school with student loans. I had a small mortgage in student loans. I bought my first home on a first-time home buyers program. We are reinventing some of those programs because we face those problems, and I want them to have the same access and opportunity that I did. But they need to understand that you've walked in their shoes, that you've seen it. I have children that are their age and are going through it, starting their careers.
Right.
And I think that's what resonates. I think that's what connects with them. And I do remind them, I hope that none of them come to government through the tragedy that I did, but it is kind of fun saying to them, I'm talking to young students, 22, 23, 20, 24 years in graduate programs. I was 28 when I got elected. I want them to know, you're not far off from where I was. This could happen for you. Yeah. Have a passion. If you want to do this, get involved.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been such a pleasure talking to you. I'm excited about what you're doing in New Jersey, and thank you for just your service for these 30 years. And I love that you seem just as passionate today about it as you probably did when you started. And that to me is so inspiring.
Well, thank you. It's a labor. I do love it, and I'm very honored to do it. And I know I've thanked you before, but it's very nice of you to ask me to do this. I'm very honored to be on your show, and I hope you'll ask again.
Absolutely. We'll have you back.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at NewDEAL for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.